I have seen a lot in my 40 years on this bench. I have watched the wealthy walk into my courtroom like the law was a minor inconvenience designed for other people. I have watched grown men in $1,000 suits treat my courtroom like a customer service counter they plan to complain their way out of. But what walked through my doors on the morning of November 14th changed something in me. Not because it was the worst thing I had ever seen, but because of what happened after. Because of the moment that nobody in that room, not the reporters, not the veterans in the gallery, not even me, saw coming. If you think you know how a story about a rich kid and a Vietnam veteran ends, I am telling you right now, you don't. Hit that subscribe button, because what I am about to tell you is the kind of thing people share at dinner tables for years. The case file landed on my desk that morning with the weight of something that had already made the local news twice. My clerk, Christina, handed it to me with that specific look she reserves for cases that are already complicated before anyone says a word. I read it in my chambers with my coffee going cold beside me. Case number 224-CR5519. State versus Carter Langdon III. Assault and battery on an elderly person. The defendant was 29 years old. His father was Elliot Langdon, founder of Langdon Capital Group, a private equity firm that managed over $4 billion in assets. Carter had grown up in a world where problems had prices, and prices were paid without blinking. He had never, in 29 years, faced a consequence that money could not dissolve. The victim was Walter Grimes, age 72, Vietnam veteran, 2 tours with the United States Marine Corps, 1969 to 1971, Silver Star, Combat Action Ribbon. He came home from the war to a country that wasn't entirely sure it wanted him back, the way it was for so many men of that generation. He never talked much about what he saw over there. His children said he kept those years in a specific drawer inside himself that he rarely opened. He became a high school shop teacher instead, spent 28 years teaching teenagers how to work with their hands, how to build something from nothing, how to take pride in a thing they made themselves. He coached youth baseball on weekends. He volunteered at the Veterans Support Center every Tuesday. He raised 3 children in the same house he still lived in, the same house where his wife had passed 2 years earlier. And every morning at exactly 8 o'clock, he walked his dog through Riverside Park, because that was the hour the world was still quiet enough for a man like him to think straight. On November 11th, Veterans Day, Walter Grimes was doing exactly that, walking his dog, a black lab named Duke, along the path near the east entrance of the park. Carter Langdon's white Porsche Cayenne came through the park road at a speed that witnesses described as alarming. 2 people who were there said later that they saw it coming and stepped back instinctively. Walter didn't step back. He raised his hand, the universal signal, slow down, just slow down. Carter stopped the car. He got out. He was wearing a Loro Piana jacket and sunglasses, and the particular expression of someone who has never been asked to slow down for anything in his entire life. He walked directly to Walter Grimes and shoved him, hard. Walter was 72 years old with a bad hip from a jungle injury that never healed correctly. He hit the pavement before anyone around him could react. Duke started barking. 3 people ran over. Carter Langdon got back in his car and drove away. Walter Grimes spent 4 nights in the hospital. Fractured hip, broken wrist, concussion. He was 72 years old, and he was in surgery within 3 hours of hitting that pavement. The surgeon later told his daughter that the hip fracture was severe enough that without surgery he would likely never walk unassisted again. When they wheeled him into the operating room, his daughter said, he was more concerned about who was going to feed Duke than about his own hip. That is the kind of man he was. That is the kind of man Carter Langdon put on the ground and drove away from. One of the witnesses, a woman who had filmed the last few seconds of the confrontation on her phone, posted the video online that evening. By the next morning, it had been viewed over 2 million times. The city was furious. Veteran advocacy groups were outside the Langdon Capital offices by noon. And Carter Langdon, according to his own attorney, spent Veterans Day evening at a fundraiser in the Hills and did not learn about the situation until the following morning. That detail, the fundraiser, the Hills, the not learning until the next morning, told me more about this young man than any case file could. Now, before I tell you what Carter Langdon looked like when he walked into my courtroom, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell me, have you ever watched someone treat a consequence like it was someone else's problem? Have you ever watched money try to erase something that couldn't be erased? Tell me, because what you are about to watch happen in my courtroom is the answer to what happens when money runs out of room. And subscribe while you were down there. Less than 5% of people watching this channel are subscribed. If you believe that a silver star and a Veterans Day morning walk should be worth more than a Porsche and a last name, hit that button. Carter Langdon III walked into my courtroom like he had been briefed on how to appear remorseful without actually being remorseful. His suit was expensive but understated. Someone had advised him on this, probably the same person who advised him to leave the Porsche at home and arrive in something less conspicuous. His posture was controlled. His expression was calibrated. Everything about the way he walked in told me that a team of people had spent time preparing him for this room, coaching him on what tone to hit and what words to avoid. He looked like a man who was ready to manage a situation rather than face one. His attorney, a man named Graham Forsyth, who had handled high-profile cases for wealthy clients across 3 states, walked beside him with the quiet confidence of someone who had made cases like this disappear before. Carter kept his eyes forward. He did not look at the gallery. He did not look at Walter Grimes, who was sitting in the front row, with a cane resting against his knee and a United States Marine Corps cap on his head. The not looking told me everything. I called the case. Carter stood. His attorney moved to speak immediately. I held up my hand. Counselor, I will hear from your client first. Mr. Langdon, how do you plead? Carter cleared his throat. Not guilty, Your Honor. Not guilty, I repeated. I looked down at the file. The incident was filmed. 3 witnesses have provided statements. The medical report documents a fractured hip, a broken wrist, and a concussion sustained by a 72-year-old man. And you are entering a plea of not guilty. His attorney stepped forward. Your Honor, we believe the video does not provide full context and that the witnesses' accounts contain significant inconsistencies. I looked at him. I did not ask you, Counselor. I looked back at Carter. Mr. Langdon, I want to hear from you. In your own words, what happened on November 11th? Carter adjusted his posture. He had clearly rehearsed this. Your Honor, I was driving through the park on my way to a meeting. The man stepped toward my vehicle in a way that I perceived as threatening. I reacted in the moment. I deeply regret that he was injured. He said it the way people say things they have been told to say, smoothly, without pausing in the wrong places, without the slight catch in the voice that comes from actually meaning something. I said, you perceived a 72-year-old man with a dog as threatening. It happened very quickly, Your Honor. It happened quickly, I said. And after it happened quickly, you got back in your car and drove to a fundraiser. The gallery made a sound, barely a sound, just a collective breath. Carter's attorney started to speak. I held up my hand again. Mr. Langdon, do you know who Walter Grimes is? For the first time, Carter's eyes moved toward the front row. A brief glance. He is the complainant, Your Honor. I stood up. I came down from the bench. I do this rarely. When I do it, people pay attention. Mr. Grimes, I said, would you please stand? Walter Grimes stood slowly, the way a man stands when getting up costs him something. He gripped his cane. He straightened his back, that military posture that never fully leaves the men who earned it. He looked at me and waited. Mr. Grimes, I said, would you tell this courtroom who you are? Walter's voice was quiet and steady. The voice of a man who had spoken in conditions where keeping your voice steady actually mattered. My name is Walter Grimes. I served in the United States Marine Corps from 1969 to 1971, 2 tours in Vietnam. I was awarded the Silver Star and the Combat Action Ribbon. I taught shop class at Roosevelt High School for 28 years. I have 3 children and 7 grandchildren. And on Veterans Day morning, I was walking my dog in the park I have walked in for 30 years. And this man got out of his car and put me on the ground. He did not gesture toward Carter when he said it. He did not raise his voice. He just said it, plainly, the way you state something that is simply true. The courtroom was absolutely silent. I looked at Carter Langdon. Do you understand what you just heard, Mr. Langdon? You shoved a Silver Star recipient, a man who walked into enemy fire so that people like you and me could stand in rooms like this one, and you called it a reaction to a perceived threat. I let that sit for a moment. A man who spent 28 years teaching children in this city, a man who was walking his dog on Veterans Day morning, and you drove to a fundraiser. Carter's practiced composure was cracking at the edges. His jaw was tighter than it had been. His attorney was very still. Your Honor, Carter said, I understand this looks bad. This does not look bad, Mr. Langdon, I said. It is bad. There is a difference. What something looks like can be managed. What something is cannot. I turned to the clerk. Let's look at the footage. We played it on the courtroom monitor. The Park Road, the Porsche moving too fast for that space, Walter raising his hand, Carter stopping, stepping out with that Loro Piana jacket and those sunglasses. The shove that sent a 72-year-old man to the ground with a force that had nothing to do with a reaction and everything to do with a decision. Duke barking, people running over, Carter walking back to his car, driving away. When it ended, I said, that is not a reaction. A reaction takes less than a second. You parked your car, Mr. Langdon. You walked toward him. You made a choice. Carter looked at the screen for a moment. Then he said something that I will remember for the rest of my career. He said, Your Honor, my father will be addressing this situation through the appropriate channels. I think it would be in everyone's interest to allow that process to work. The courtroom went very quiet. I said, the appropriate channels. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Langdon, I said, this courtroom is the appropriate channel. There is no other channel. There is no process above this one. This is where the appropriate channel ends. His attorney put a hand on Carter's arm. Carter pulled away slightly. And then he said the thing that brought the whole building down. He said, with respect, Your Honor, my father has relationships with people at every level of this system. I just think it would be wise to let those relationships do what they do. Are you still watching? Drop a like right now if you believe that money should not be able to buy its way out of a courtroom. Because what happened next is the moment this case became something I will talk about for the rest of my life. I looked out at the gallery. There was a man sitting in the 4th row in a plain gray suit, no tie, no briefcase. He had been sitting there since the doors opened, and he had not moved, had not spoken, had not done anything to draw attention to himself. He was perhaps 60 years old, silver-haired, with the straight posture and controlled expression of a man who had spent decades making decisions that other people had to live with. He was Elliot Langdon. He had come without his security, without his assistant, without anyone. He had come alone to watch. I had been informed he was there before the session began. I said, Mr. Langdon, Elliot Langdon, would you please come forward? Carter's head snapped toward the 4th row. His face went through 4 expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, a flash of relief, then something else when he read his father's face, something that looked a lot like fear. Elliot Langdon stood. He buttoned his jacket. He walked down the aisle with the unhurried pace of a man who had learned that moving slowly when the room expects speed is its own kind of authority. He came to the front and stood beside his son. Carter said, "Dad, what? You don't have to." Elliot looked at his son. He didn't say anything. Carter stopped talking. I addressed Elliot Langdon directly. "Mr. Langdon, your son has suggested to this court that your relationships within the legal system will influence the outcome of this case. I want to give you the opportunity to address that." Elliot Langdon was quiet for a moment. Then he turned and looked at Walter Grimes, sitting in the front row with his Marine Corps cap and his cane. He looked at him for a long time. Walter met his eyes and didn't look away. Then Elliot turned back to me. His voice was level, precise, the voice of a man who chose every word carefully because he had learned what carelessly chosen words cost. "Your Honor," he said, "my son is wrong. I do not have relationships within the legal system designed to override justice. I have relationships built over a lifetime of business, and I have spent that lifetime teaching my son the difference between influence and immunity. Clearly," he said this without looking at Carter, "I failed." Carter said, "Dad, Carter." One word. Elliot continued, "I watched the video the morning it went online. I saw what my son did to this man. I came here today because I wanted to look Mr. Grimes in the eye, and because I wanted my son to see me do it. I am not here to negotiate. I am not here to manage a situation. I am here because Walter Grimes deserves to have someone from my family sit in this room and accept what happened without trying to make it smaller than it is." He paused. "I am asking you, Your Honor, to hold my son fully accountable, not because I do not love him, because I do, and because protecting him from this would be the worst thing I could do for him. He is 29 years old. If he does not learn this lesson today in this room, he will spend the rest of his life being the man he was on November 11th, and I will not allow that, even if he hates me for it." He stopped. The courtroom held its breath. Carter was not performing anymore. His eyes were red. His jaw was working like he was trying to find words and couldn't. The attorney beside him was utterly still. I let the silence hold for a moment. Then I said, "Mr. Langdon, Elliot, thank you. You may be seated." He walked back to the fourth row. On his way, he stopped at Walter Grimes's seat. He extended his hand. Walter looked at it for 3 full seconds. Then he shook it. Elliot sat down. I looked at Carter. He was still standing at the front of the courtroom, and for the first time since he had walked through those doors, he looked like a person instead of a performance. I said, "Mr. Langdon, do you have anything you want to say? Not what your attorney prepared, not what you rehearsed, something real." Carter was quiet for a long moment. Then, I didn't know who he was. His voice was raw. "I mean, I know I know it doesn't matter, but I didn't know. I've never had anyone make me slow down before. I didn't know what to do with it." He stopped. "That's not an excuse. I know it's not an excuse. I didn't know how to be that person, the person who slows down." It was the most honest thing he had said since walking in. I said, "Then we are going to teach you. Carter Langdon III. On the charge of assault and battery on an elderly person, I find you guilty. The evidence is unambiguous. Your behavior after the incident, leaving the scene, attending a social event, delegating the response to your father, demonstrates a pattern of treating consequences as administrative problems rather than human ones. That ends today. Here is your sentence. 180 days in the county correctional facility, suspended pending full compliance with the following conditions. You will complete 250 hours of community service at the Veterans Affairs Support Center and at the city's senior care facilities. Not administrative work, direct service. You will sit with people. You will listen to them. You will learn their names. You will complete 1 full year of counseling focused specifically on accountability, empathy, and the consequences of privilege unchecked. You will write a formal letter of apology to Walter Grimes, a real one, written by you, not reviewed by your attorney, to be read aloud in this courtroom at your compliance review in 6 months. And you will fund in full Walter Grimes' medical expenses, rehabilitation, and any ongoing care resulting from injuries sustained on November 11th. Not through a foundation, not through a tax structure. You will write the check yourself, and you will hand it to him in person. Carter nodded at each condition. His attorney wrote quickly. Carter didn't look at the attorney. I leaned forward one last time. Mr. Langdon, your father just did something in this courtroom that many fathers are not capable of. He chose you over his own comfort. He chose your growth over your protection. That is what love looks like when it costs something. I suggest you spend whatever time you have in the coming months thinking about the kind of man who deserves a father like that, and then become him. 6 months later, I received a letter from the director of the Veterans Affairs Support Center. She wrote that Carter Langdon had arrived on his first day with a driver who waited outside. By his third week, he was taking the bus. By his second month, he was arriving before his scheduled hours. By month 4, he had organized a fundraising drive among his father's network that raised over $340,000 for veteran housing support in the city. She wrote, "He is not the same person who walked in here. I don't know what happened to him, but something in him changed. He listens now, really listens. These men have stories that the world does not hear, and he sits with them and he hears them. I thought you should know." Walter Grimes wrote me a letter too. He wrote that Carter had come to find him on a Saturday morning in February. They sat on Walter's front porch. Carter apologized for 45 minutes. Walter said he let him finish. Then Walter told him about Vietnam, about the Mekong, about coming home to an airport where people turned their backs, about learning to find your peace in small routines, a morning walk, a good dog, a park that knows you by heart. Walter wrote, "I told that boy that the bravest thing a man can do is admit he was wrong and then prove it with his life. He cried on my porch. Duke sat in his lap. I think he is going to be all right." I think about that letter a lot. I think about Elliot Langdon walking down that courtroom aisle with his jacket buttoned and his face composed and his heart breaking. I think about what it costs to choose your child's growth over your child's comfort when you have the resources to simply make it all go away. I think about Walter Grimes extending his hand from his seat with his Marine Corps cap and his cane and his quiet, unshakable dignity. I have been on this bench for 40 years. I have seen the law fail people who deserved better. I have seen it succeed in ways that surprised even me. I have seen fathers beg me to go easy on their children, men who had built empires from nothing, who sat in my courtroom and looked at me with the particular desperation of someone trying to protect the thing they love most in the world from the consequences it earned. I understand that instinct. I do not judge it. But I have also seen what happens to young people when that protection is granted, how it hardens into entitlement, how entitlement hardens into the kind of man who shoves a 72-year-old veteran on a Veterans Day morning and drives to a fundraiser. Elliot Langdon understood that. He sat in that fourth row and he made the harder choice. He chose his son's soul over his son's comfort. He chose Walter Grimes's right to a morning walk over Carter's right to a clean record. He chose the version of his son that might exist on the other side of accountability over the version that would exist without it. That is what love looks like when it costs something real. Not the easy love that protects, the hard love that holds firm. And what I have learned, the one thing that 40 years has made absolutely clear, is that justice is not a mechanism. It is not a building or a system or a set of rules. Justice is a choice that people make. Every person in that courtroom made a choice on November 14th. Elliot Langdon chose his son's growth over his son's comfort. Walter Grimes chose grace over anger. And Carter Langdon, standing on a porch in February with a dog in his lap and 45 minutes of real apology behind him, made the choice that all of it was for. That is enough That is everything. Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If this moved you, if you believe that a silver star and a Veterans Day morning should be worth more than a last name and a checkbook, hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that accountability is not the end of a person's story. It is the beginning of the real one. Subscribe to this channel because I have more stories like this one, and every single one of them matters. And leave me a comment telling me, what would you have done if you were Elliot Langdon? If you had the money to make it disappear and the love for your child that makes you want to, what would you have chosen? Tell me, because the answer to that question is who you really are.